go. There we go. Okay. As is our practice, before we get into the materials, a little disclaimer that this is all of this material is taken from Greg Koukl's Tactics, a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions. Greg is the founder and president of Stand to Reason and a fantastic Christian apologist. If you guys haven't heard of him, definitely check him out. His website is str.org. He's got lots of great resources and will help you think deeply about your Christian faith. Mrs. Johnson, welcome. All right. So that's Greg. And we are going to start out, as we normally do, with a little demonstrating mastery. Who remembers what the third Colombo tactic is?
Perfecting the Colombo tactic. Hold on, executing.
No, ma'am.
Wait, hold up. When you say the third application, what do you mean?
What is the third application of the Colombo tactic? We discussed it 2 weeks ago.
Hold up.
Well, see, I've
Look,
slept
it's
a lot
rolled
since
down
I
here.
know, we've slept since then.
Okay, so it was a, what do you mean by that? Is that what you're talking about? And then,
how did you come to that conclusion?
That was the second question.
That was the second question.
Mhm.
Can you let me understand this?
Application. Okay, your turn.
anticipate, reflect, practice. Well, that's improve your skills.
All right, to help us keep moving.
Can you clear this up for me?
Validate, what is it?
Validate? No?
I don't know what the application was, that we're supposed to be able to talk to people,
Oh,
but
the combo tactic. I'm just curious, help me out. I'm a little confused on something. Maybe.
that's just the questions. That's not an
Those are the
application.
questions. Yeah. All right. So here's a hint. The third application is using a question to make a point.
Oh, yeah, use those pieces to make your point. Yeah, that's the first thing.
There you go.
Oh,
She knew it was in there
Yep.
Determine the
Oh,
steps you
use
need
those
to
pieces
take
to
to
make
make
your
your
point.
point or
Yeah.
arrive at your conclusions. Ask questions to get your friend to put as many of those steps or parts on the table so you can use them. Use those pieces to make your point.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Use those pieces
So
to
next
make-
up, what are the key ways of finding a flaw in the other person's view?
Paying close attention to the answer. How did you come to that conclusion?
Law.
I think that's pretty close. First up, there's no special formula.
Mhm.
Okay, so there's no one way that's right all the time. You're going to have to be the judge of that as you move on. Next up is listen carefully and think about what is said. That's, any conversation that you have, you should definitely make sure that you're paying attention to the other what the other person is saying and thinking about what they're saying and not just waiting your turn to speak. Sometimes I get involved in that habit, and it's one that I've been trying to break forever. Is I've got something to say, so I shut everything off. So it's just not good. Don't do that. And study. When it comes to these bigger topics, there are a lot of different interesting ideas out there. Just as a side note, it's important to remember that ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims. So be sure that when you're studying it, as we've said in this class before, Christianity is worth thinking about. So definitely think on these things. If you have questions, make sure that you're studying them. Because if you have those questions, more than likely somebody else is as well. All right, so next up, there are 3 specific ways to improve the Colombo tactic or your Colombo skills. There you go. If they all come up, anticipate, reflect, and practice. Very good. All right, what are 2 steps to defend against?
You took them down too quick.
I'm sorry.
I know, we're having to do it quick.
Yes,
AR.
anticipate, reflect, and practice. ARP, isn't that retired persons?
No, because they sent it to me.
Okay, and then our last question, what are 2 steps to defend against the Colombo tactic?
Stop the advance, regain control.
Wow, all right, now we're rolling. Stop the advance, and regain control. Very good. Thank you, guys. And last week we asked the question, has anybody had the opportunity to use the Colombo tactic? And Mrs. Johnson told us that she had been thinking about those questions as she was listening to somebody else speak. So has anybody had the opportunity over the last 2 weeks to engage in conversations? And
Yeah.
yes?
Mm.
And how'd that go?
I guess it went pretty good because I kind of like just really didn't voice the issue with her, you know, because I don't feel like, I think at some point you don't want to put, especially when a person says they're not a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to just throw so much on them, because I really had to ask, you know, call Pastor Rowland and like clarify some certain things with it. So it just happened to be like one of Darren's exes, because the thing was, she was saying that she was getting married to this guy, and she said her pastor was godfather and told her that she didn't need premarital counseling.
Oh, okay.
There was no need for it. And I told her that's not true. You really actually need to go through that. I said, the thing with y'all young people nowadays, and I'm not that old, but still, like the thing with it is y'all live by the quotas of the streets.
Mhm.
You know, if you're my ride or die, if you do this, you know, you gotta prove so much, you know,
Right.
when you out there like that. So, and I think that's really what she's going by, because you know, she's like, he's a hood guy, but he just got out of jail, and we've been talking for a minute off and on, and she, you know, went on to tell me that he was there for murder, and she said that he was on track with God and all of that, but I'm trying to figure out if he's on, in my mind, if he's on track with God and trying to give his life to God, as you say, and you're not a Christian, y'all already messed up because you're unequally yoked.
Right.
So I couldn't just go to just get into a deep conversation with her, but so to speak, where she said she wasn't a Christian. You know, what makes you, why are you not? Is there something you may have heard that made you feel like you didn't need to be or shouldn't be? So at that point, she didn't answer. She didn't ever take back and got quiet. So I just haven't had a chance to, you know, talk to her again about it. But she's actually doing my decorations for my birthday party.
Oh,
My
okay.
birthday get together. So hopefully while she's doing that at the house, I can be able to talk to her a little more, since I'm probably gonna have to be interacting with a lot of young women in the future. So
Right.
hopefully I can talk to her about it then, and just see what, you know, what's the issues behind it, you know, her beliefs, why she doesn't believe.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great. And remember that you don't have to hit a home run every time you're at bat. You know, sometimes it's just enough to get up at bat.
Yeah.
You know, make sure that you take those opportunities. Our goal is not to necessarily pull in the harvest, but to plant the seed. So we need to do a little gardening.
Cause I had this thing where I correct them a lot on Instagram when I have it open or whatnot, because they be on there and say God got me, but they spell it G-O-D, and I say, what God are you talking about? Because the God I know, it's a capital G-O-D. So who are you talking about? You know, and it's just funny because they be like, well, Mama, you know what I'm saying? No, I don't know what you're saying, because I don't know that God. Who are you talking about?
I get anxiety when I do it.
You know, so I just make a laugh with them, you know, so that it doesn't make them feel so, you know, make them feel offended at any point.
Yeah.
So they know how serious I am when it comes to that issue, and they're not disrespectful at all. They're not disrespectful about it at all. They respect who I am, and you know, I still respect them, you know, who they are, but I try to at least try to, you know, give them a head start on going down a better path than what they're on.
Yeah, I think
You know,
that's good.
so,
I think that's real good. You know, and something that I like to remind people of is that, you know, you should not take the name of the Lord in vain. You know, that's such a big deal to God that he put it in his top 10. So let's be careful how we use his name. All right. So a little review, and the third use of the Colombo tactic, using questions to make a point. We talked about listening carefully and thinking about what's said, and then pay close attention to the reasons given. given to Colombo number 2, how did you come to that conclusion? And ask yourself the conclusions that follow from the evidence. We also learned 3 steps to improve the Colombo skills. We anticipate objections. Bless you. We anticipate objections. We think about questions in advance. We reflect afterwards on the questions that we might have asked in that situation. And we also practice those questions. You know, anytime you're in a game, in a battle, whatever the case may be, you're always better prepared for it if you practice ahead of time. Having conversations about Christ with other folks is the same thing. We also learned how to defend when the Colombo tactic is being used against us. We stop the advance by politely saying, I'd rather not answer that question, or I want to know what you think. And then we regain control by saying, why don't you state your point clearly so that I don't misunderstand, along with your specific reasons for holding that view? And then let me think about it. And in this session, we will learn about the suicide tactic. We'll cover the basics of self-refuting claims. We'll learn how to recognize when someone's view self-destructs, and we will see how specific popular ideas commit suicide and then learn how to respond to them. And then finally, I'll show you a unique variation of the suicide tactic Greg calls sibling rivalry. Okay, so first up is the suicide tactic. The suicide tactic takes advantage of the tendency of many erroneous points or points of view that people have, and they seem to self-destruct. These self-destructive views are commonly called self-refuting statements. These statements, these views defeat themselves all on their own, and all you have to do is point it out. For example, consider the dialogue from this Peanuts cartoon. Xavier, do you know who the Peanuts are?
Absolutely, Charlie Brown.
All right.
Snoopy.
Snoopy is my favorite one.
There you go. All right. So have a look at this cartoon. And this is an example of a self-refuting argument. So Sally says, no, that's my new philosophy. I don't care what anyone says. The answer is no. So Charlie Brown responds, that's your philosophy, huh? Sally says, yes, I mean, no. After a pause, she says, you ruined my new philosophy. So this is kind of silly, but it's a perfect example of what we're talking about. How many times have you guys heard people make statements like that? And let's look at some different views of that. The suicide tactic. Statements that commit suicide have within them the seeds of their own destruction. So here's an example of that. I cannot speak a word in English. As soon as I say that, you guys can immediately recognize that I'm committing the suicide with my own statement, right? So how about the next one? There are no sentences more than 5 words in length. Yeah, so does this commit suicide? Why does it commit suicide?
About 4.
1, 2,
Yeah.
3, 4. Right after more.
Exactly. All right, let's try another one. You can't know anything for sure. So why is this a suicide?
Because how can you know that you can't know anything
Yeah,
for sure?
right. You could ask, do you know that for sure?
It's a snake biting its own tail.
It is. It absolutely is. All right. So next up is we have a philosopher, apologist, and author, J.P. Moreland, who points out that every statement is about something. For example, the sentence, dogs have fleas, it's about dogs, right?
And fleas.
And fleas, right.
It's about.
But really, it's about dogs.
Yeah.
Okay, so sometimes statements include in themselves what they're referring to. So the statement, all English sentences are short. So when it says that, it's not just making a claim, but it's also making a claim about itself, right?
Right.
This is included in all English statements. So suicidal statements cannot satisfy their own standard. Like the example we looked at that said, there are no sentences more than 5 words in length, right? it can't satisfy its own standards, right?
There should be only 5 words in a sentence, but
Well,
We're-
unfortunately,
we're
not everybody
chatting.
has a 140 character limit like Twitter does. Some people are allowed to drone on and on and on and on. Okay. But so if they can't satisfy their own standard, the minute someone utters them, they become false. So even when such statements initially appear to be true, they are still false. So just because they're said well doesn't actually make it true. So this holds true for all self-refuting statements, and the exact same reason used against your view also defeat the reasons themselves. Then the view is self-defeating and commit suicide. Let's look at a few more examples. All right, so here's how the suicide tactic works. The suicide tactic works, it trades on a fundamental rule of logic, the law of non-contradiction. So Dadrian, as our philosophy major, what is the law of non-contradiction?
It says that things cannot both be and not be in the same at the same time in the same sense.
That's correct. Yeah. So the way a lot of philosophers put it is A cannot be both A and not A at the same time in the same way. Right? So if I say a dog is not a dog, that's a contradiction. It either is a dog or it's not a dog. One or the other.
Sounds like riddles to me, but.
Well, yeah, and a lot of people say these riddles, but they don't realize they're saying them. So it's important for us. That's why we need to listen carefully and think clearly about what they're saying. So next up, all suicidal views express or entail contradictions. They make two different claims at odds with each other. The contradiction is A is the case and A is not the case, may be explicit or implicit. What are the difference between explicit and implicit? Anybody know offhand? That's okay, because
well,
we're,
implicit
ain't good.
something to do with implied. It's implicit. Explicit. not so-
okay.
Yeah, explicit is more out of the table, implicit is a little bit under the.
Yeah,
under the-
absolutely. Yeah, and the way I think of it is explicit is loud, implicit is soft. Okay, so why don't we try a few examples of explicit contradictions. I never repeat a word, never. Is that explicit?
Yeah.
Why is it explicit?
It's obvious.
It's obvious, yeah.
They've repeated the word never, right? Even though they said they never repeat a word, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How about this
Okay,
one?
Hold up.
Oop.
So if they say I never repeat a word ever, how does that go? Because
Well, that's-
ever is in never.
Well, that's an
That's not self-refuting though.
Okay,
I mean, if they say that, then, you know, then they're
Okay.
fine.
so that is just using that same word basically again in the same sentence?
Right.
well, it's-
Okay,
Because the claim is
it's
they
not
never
the
repeat a
same
word.
sentence, though, because there's a period.
Right. No, they say
But
they
it just-
never repeat a word. And then they repeat the word.
Yeah.
okay.
So that's where it commits suicide right there. Okay. So next one is there are no absolutes. There are no absolutes. Why does that one commit suicide?
Because he's making an
He's an
absolute.
absolute.
saying there are no absolutes.
He's making an absolute statement, right?
Yeah.
There are no absolutes. Well, is that absolutely true? All right,
So is that explicit?
these are all explicit.
Oh, these are all
Yep.
explicit.
So these are all the loud ones. All right. So this one you guys have probably seen in the business world, in, you know, reading books. This page is intentionally left blank,
Except for the state.
except for the statement that's written on the page, which makes it not blank.
I get it.
Yeah.
I kinda get it.
Liar, liar.
Yeah, right.
That one is
All
so
right, how about
true.
this one? I used to believe in reincarnation, but that was in a former life.
That's hilarious.
That's funny. Sounds drunk, but it's fun.
Right. So why is this a contradiction?
Because if you had a former life, you had to be reincarnated if you're here now.
Right. But if you don't believe it anymore, then you don't believe you had a former life.
Mhm.
That snake biting its tail again.
Yeah. That's kind of an interesting thought on that one.
It really is.
All right, how about this last one? I will give you 3 good reasons you can't use logic to find truth. No giggling at this one? Where's the contradiction here?
So using logic to, as a truth maker of that statement.
They're trying to use logic to disprove logic. That's the contradiction,
That's a very good reason.
right? Can you make a logical case for there being no good use of logic?
And they want to give you 3.
Yeah, they want to give you
They
3 of
want
them.
it, not just one.
Not just one. They're going to go overboard and give you 3. All right. Now, oh,
Yeah, that's when you really have to really pick the words.
yeah, absolutely. So it gets a little trickier. Some of these are pretty obvious. Others, it takes a little more thought. And we're going to get into the implicit contradictions,
Okay.
examples of implicit contradictions.
It goes back to what you said about the Colombo tactic and listening carefully, especially with that last one.
Listening carefully and thinking about what they said. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's look at the first one. The first one is, my brother is an only child. Is that-
Sounds like something I would say, because I do that to my brother when I say, I talked to your daddy this morning, like, he's not my dad. So
Right.
like,
Right,
We're not claiming him this. today.
right. So this one's a little more subtle,
Yeah.
but where's the contradiction here?
If he's your brother, he can't be an only child.
Exactly. You can't be an
But
only
you were-
child if you got a
you're-
brother.
Somebody said that sentence.
Yeah. All right, let's look at another example. I never tell the truth.
So, you must be lying.
So is that a lie?
Yes, it's-
Right, absolutely. It is very circular. So next one, and this one was a actual quote from a young fella that named Yogi Berra. So,
He had a bunch of those, didn't he?
oh, he was, yeah. If you look up Yogi Berra quotes, it goes on for days. It's unbelievable. Yeah, so he's fertile ground for fun things to say. So he says, always go to other people's funerals, otherwise they won't go to yours. Always. So if you go to somebody's funeral, do you think the odds are good that they'll come to yours?
Negative.
Well, if they have nothing better to do.
Somebody's gonna have to dig them up and, yeah, well, yeah, if you believe in reincarnation, good point. Haiku. All right, next up, and this is the almost the last one, but ask me about my vow of silence. Is there a contradiction here?
because you're
Sign language,
talking
maybe?
now.
I know.
You're talking to say that.
Right. These are the contradictions. But these are the things we need to watch for when people are giving responses. All right. Next up. Figure out where I'm at. Okay. Greg had a caller to his radio show. And on that call, this person said, you shouldn't be correcting Christian teachers publicly on the radio. Does this sound like a contradiction? Why? Who's on the radio? Right. So this caller was doing to Greg what he said Greg should not be doing, right? He's calling a Christian teacher on the radio, public radio, and saying, correcting him
that he shouldn't have
saying
done
that
it.
he shouldn't be doing that.
I wanna say, bro, think about what you just said.
Maybe he doesn't think of whoever it was that he was calling as a Christian teacher.
Well, Greg is pretty clear about that
Yeah,
on the
but-
radio. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what
so
I'm saying. This person doesn't think of him as a Christian teacher, maybe.
he may not.
Maybe not.
He may not. All right, let's see if all right. How about this one? You shouldn't force your morality on me.
Bro, who said I was forcing it?
Well, so what's the contradiction here?
They're trying to force their morality on you, but no.
That's
You telling
exactly
him-
it.
You telling him not to force it on you, but you trying to force what you're saying on him.
That's exactly right. That is exactly it. So,
He's forcing his morality.
right.
Yeah.
So is that your morality that you're trying to force on me? All
Hey,
right.
this
So now
is
we're gonna
Chip
do something a
speaking.
little
This
fun,
is Chip
I think.
speaking. Can you hear me?
And we're gonna see a conversation between Gil and Greg.
No, for some
That's Gil,
reason,
that's Greg.
they can only hear
Not
each
really
other.
Gil.
They
I
can't
just
hear us.
pulled a
Chip.
random image out.
Oh, okay. Well, they were wrong on the last one.
Here's the conversation. Gil says, let's see, where's
Oh,
Gil?
put it in the
Gil
chat.
says, Greg, you Christians are always judging other people. It's wrong for you to judge others.
But he judging him by saying it's. You got it.
So Greg says, then why are you judging me? To which Gil responds, okay. It's all right to judge as long as you don't try to force your morality on other people.
Bro, ain't you forcing it right now?
Greg says, is that your morality?
Mm.
If so, why are you forcing it on me? To which Gil responds, it's not fair. There's no way I can say it so that it sounds right. Greg says, it doesn't sound right because it isn't right. It's self-refuting. Gil says, now you've got me all confused. And Greg says, no, you were confused when you started. You just now realize it.
Now we both agree.
Right. But in conversations, if you guys have conversations about Christianity, you will hear things just like that, where people will say, you're too judgmental. Is that how you judge me? So, these kinds of things come up all the time. So when you guys are having conversations like this, and I know Greg looks a little square in that one, but that was the best picture I could find for him for my particular use. But if things start getting elevated in your conversation, here's a quick ambassador tip. Use the person's name. If things get heated between you and you start going to help bring the things down, because remember, when we talked about in one of our first sessions, if we're having a conversation and I get mad, then I lose. If we're having a conversation and you get mad, I lose, right? So the goal is to have a pleasant, winsome conversation with those around you. And we're supposed to be ambassadors here. And if either party gets mad, then you lose. You're going to lose the conversation and you might not ever have a chance to share the gospel with this person again. So using their name can help kind of bring them down and refocus it, because deep down, we're all kind of selfish and proud, I guess, and we like to hear our own name. So use their name, and it also helps make that connection, especially if it's somebody that you don't necessarily know. If you're talking one-on-one, that's great with somebody you do know, but if it's somebody you don't, just, hey, wait, let me ask your name. What's your name? Okay. All right, so that's just a quick side trip. Next up, the suicide tactic and the Colombo tactic. The suicide and the Colombo tactic work well together as you pay attention to the person's viewpoint and notice that his or her view commits suicide, point it out with a Colombo question. So to recognize a point that commits suicide, take the following steps. First, identify the basic premise, conviction, or claim. It's not always obvious, as some of these examples we've looked at are. Some of them are blatantly obvious, but not all of them are. Next, ask yourself if the claim undermines itself. Does this statement satisfy its own requirements? Like I never repeat a word, never? Is there an internal contradiction? There are no English sentences over 5 words unless it's this sentence. Can there be, let's see, oops, did I go too far? Define basic. Ask yourself, okay, so does, and then can there be an idea stated in the form of X is the case and X is not the case at the same time? If so, it commits suicide. So that's that law of non-contradiction. Is it in violation of that principle? All right, now we're going to have some more fun. Let's try it. An anthropology professor says to a Christian student, you shouldn't be a missionary because it's wrong to try and change other people's religious beliefs. What do you guys think about this? Is this a contradiction? And if so, why? Are they committing the suicide tactic or suicide with their statement?
Well, the professor is trying to change the student's idea. So
What kind of
he's
idea
doing-
is that?
That's the religious belief. So, I mean, it just, he's doing the same thing he's telling the student is wrong.
That is absolutely the case. You shouldn't be a missionary because it's wrong to change other people's religious beliefs. As Christian, what is our belief? Our belief is, what's the Great Commission? Go and make disciples of all nations, right?
Right.
Which is trying to change other people's beliefs. So you're telling me not to do what my religion, or you're telling me not to adhere to my religion.
Yeah,
so-
so you're trying to change my religious
Right.
beliefs.
That's exactly what it is. All right, let's try a different one. Like I said, some of these aren't always easy to spot, but if you think about them, you can spot it. Next one. All religions are equally true and valid. Heimlich? Is it the question or the drink?
Equally true and valid.
Right. All religions are true and valid, all equally true and valid.
How would you know that?
That's a great question. You know, if you're using your Colombo tactics, that would be a great. But what we're doing here is trying to think about what's being said
And see
and
whether
then
it's a suicide.
see what it's a suicide, and if it commits suicide, and if it does, why? Why does it commit suicide?
How do you know that? All religions are equally true and valid.
All
How do
is-
you know that?
is-
All. The key
All
word
is
is
kind
all.
of
Right.
too encompassing, encompassing.
Right.
And to say that they're equally true and valid, that's also an opinion. Like, I think in a certain
So
way,
I-
kind of,
I mean,
You
I
know,
think it's rubbish.
'cause
but
not
I don't know
everybody
if
gonna
it's a
believe that.
suicide,
yeah,
'cause it's-
that, yeah, that, I think that's suicide.
I don't know.
Okay.
And so if all religions are equally true and valid, then why would they fight against hearing about the gospel that I'm sharing? If that's, I mean, it's a religion, so
Mhm.
if it's true and valid, then why the fight?
That's a good question. But I don't think that's necessarily the contradiction in this.
Okay.
So let me ask you guys this. We talked about, I think it was last time we were together, we talked about Jesus and the agony of the cross, the
Mhm.
physical, mental, and the spiritual separation that he had from God for the first time in all eternity. If Jesus suffered that, if there were any other ways to God, would he have done that?
Okay, I'm gonna say that again.
Okay. God sent his only begotten son to suffer and die for us, to suffer the humiliation, first of all, of becoming a human. Can you imagine God himself having his rear end wiped and falling and scraping a knee and all those kinds of things and go through, 30 some years and then end up on the cross, naked and tortured and ridiculed and everything else, and then be separated from God the Father for the first time in all of eternity? Why would he have done all of that if there are other ways to get to God.
Mm.
That is the central claim of Christianity. And if all religions are true and equally true and valid, is that what other religions preach?
Nope.
No. Buddhism, Hinduism, Muslim, even Judaism, they don't teach that. So those views are in conflict. So they cannot all be equally true and valid.
They don't believe in suffering. I feel like there's some religions don't feel like you have to suffer in order to get where you need to go.
Yeah, because I think like Jehovah's Witnesses think this is paradise here on earth. You know, I've had someone
man.
tell me that
So
they think this is paradise here on earth.
I've
They
heard that
came
too.
to my door.
Right.
They came to my door and they came to my door like literally every week.
Right.
to
So
talk to me.
if that's the case, if Jehovah's Witnesses believe that this is paradise on earth, what does the Bible teach?
You don't teach that.
It doesn't teach that. So
Yeah.
You don't teach
they
that.
both can't be true.
No,
They both can't be valid.
that's false.
Right. So we see these
Look at
contradictions.
your own experience.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. I know.
This is paradise. I don't want nothing to do with paradise.
Well, if it was paradise, I would have had my keys with me and we would have started on time. Yeah. So-
everything would have been on top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know that it's not. All right. Next one. You can only know what's been proven by science.
What?
You can only know what's been proven by science. There are atheists who will come to you and say, prove to me that God is real.
But science,
And you have to prove that to me through
but
science.
science only covers the natural world.
That's true.
Anything in any religion, especially ours,
Right.
is that what we believe has nothing to do with the natural world.
And
We're
God
talking
is
about
the
supernatural world.
God is supernatural.
Yeah. And I don't know that that's entirely true. Adrian, were you going to say something?
I don't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead. What?
No, I was gonna say that statement hinges on the word know and knowledge. So if by knowledge you mean like what you can, like what you are immediately aware of, then I could see, I see what it means. So like you can only know or have some kind of certainty with things that are in the physical world, but you can only assume things that are supernatural, which may not be what they are saying, but that's at least how I understand it, that you can only assume or guess that there is something supernatural, but you can't know that.
Mhm. And that may be the case, but what they're saying is that the only way you can know anything is through science. So remember, we're looking specifically at the statement,
Because it says only. You know,
Right.
Only know.
right? But remember, we talked about J.P. Moreland, and he said that every statement is about something. So is this in the knowledge that we know? So is this a knowledge claim?
I mean, that's a knowledge claim.
It is a knowledge claim,
Mhm.
right? So if it's a knowledge claim, and knowledge can only be what's proven by science, can you prove this statement by science?
Oh. Okay,
The answer is no.
no,
So that's a self-contradiction. It's
Right.
self-defeating.
right.
You can only know what has been proven by science. Okay, can you prove that statement by science? No. So that one commits the suicide tactic.
I probably would say, okay, so who invented science?
Who invented science?
Right.
Like, who came up with it? Like, do you know the individual?
They can actually track back the father of science.
Yeah.
So there is a guy, and I forget what his name is, but he's been relegated to the annals of history.
And is the word science in the Bible? Is that
Uh,
word in the Bible? Does it appear in the Bible anywhere?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
So where
I've
we
never
come
really
from?
seen
I don't
science.
think they knew
I've
about
never seen
science
Yeah.
back in.
No, I'm
So-
saying the
Yeah.
word, not the,
Yeah.
Right.
I'm saying the word science. Is it in the Bible? Is it mentioned in the Bible anywhere?
No, it comes from a Latin word, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's probably correct. But why would that be
It's
relevant?
actually on the-
Hmm?
Why do you ask
I
that?
just,
Are the
you
only,
can only know what has been proven by science. So I just wanted to know exactly where the word science come from to know that there is science. That's all. I'm just, I don't know.
I think that's good, but
Y'all know
so-
I'm weird.
and we enjoy weird. We're all weird. Yeah. But
Like, okay,
Yeah.
so.
So
let me just-
I would be careful with that because then somebody would come back to you and say, there's a lot of words not in the Bible.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, no, I'm saying honestly, is the word, where did science, the word science come from? I'm asking an honest question. Where did the word science come from?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times with me,
Ask
if it's
Google.
not a word that I've heard in the Bible, like I be want to know where some of the words in the vocabulary come from in
Right.
the dictionary.
Well, you should ask those same questions about the words in the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And remember that even as Christians, we talk about a lot of words that we use commonly today that aren't in the Bible,
Yeah.
like the word Trinity.
Mhm.
That's not spoken anywhere. The idea is there, the
Yeah.
concept is there,
Yeah.
it's revealed through the scriptures, but the word itself is not there.
Yeah.
It
So
probably came from a different language than the Bible was written in.
no,
wasn't it?
no, it was just the idea of a Trinity. That phrase was coined well after
No,
the
I'm
Bible was
sorry,
written.
because y'all was talking and I was just thinking, I was like, I wonder where that word.
No, that's good. See if,
Just because of what y'all was talking
Right.
about, I was like, dang, where did the word science come from? Like,
there is a history to it. I don't know the history to the word science. It probably comes from Latin. Most of our words do, Latin or Greek. But that's a whole nother thing. All right, so how about this one? There is no truth.
ain't no truth to what you just said.
So does this statement commit suicide? If so, why?
Well, that was Russian roulette.
Really? Hell,
Right.
really,
Do
Russian
you think-
roulette.
Do you think that's, do you think that's true?
That's a perfectly adequate question. There is no truth. Is that
There-
true?
What's your definition of
Then there's
truth?
no.
Yeah. Right.
It's that snake biting.
And that's exactly what it is. So if somebody says to you, there is no truth, ask them, is that true?
Chris, did you mention how to respond the science question?
Yeah, Katie.
You can't know anything by science?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that statement commits suicide because you can't prove that statement through science.
Okay.
Yeah, and back up to that statement. You can only know what's been proven by science. Can you prove this statement by science?
Can you prove it? Okay,
Scientifically, can you prove it? No.
got it.
This is a philosophical claim.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so there is no truth. Next one up. It is wrong to try to change other people's religious beliefs. We kind of talked about this a little with the professor. So by making that statement,
By
you are
making that statement, they're trying to change.
change religious beliefs. Right. All right. So sometimes people don't see contradictions staring them right in the face. And when that happens, gently point it out to them, like these statements we just looked at. Other times they miss contradictions because they don't have information they need, like with the claim, all religions lead to God.
Negative. Negative.
Right.
Because religious people is who killed Jesus. So like, already, I mean, I don't know. How about that one?
Yeah. So let's think about that. Do all religions lead to God?
Maybe little g.
Yeah.
Not big G.
Is there little g gods?
No, I don't believe there is,
No.
but it might believe to their little g God.
We have all kinds of idols.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's that little G.
Yeah,
That's what
that's
you're
that
talking
little G.
about.
Yeah.
That
Right,
little
but
G, those
that's an
idols.
idol, right?
Statues.
Yeah.
You can make that idol into a god, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a statue. It could be money,
Or
could be
whatever,
fame, it
yeah.
could be likes on
But-
Facebook, or
But they don't, but not our God, because that's a capital G.
that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that stands alone.
I'd be asking, how do you know that?
He's the only
Yeah.
truth, one truth.
Yeah. How do you know that? All right. So
Which religions are you talking about?
So we can see that is not the case. And let's just back that up with some truth. Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
That is capital T, capital R, capital U, capital E.
Yes, ma'am. That is absolutely true. So that was the claim that Jesus made. And if Jesus made that claim, then call it a day.
I read that earlier in my Bible plan.
That's my favorite scripture.
Yeah.
One of them. Number one.
Yeah, one of
That was on my calendar page last month.
What's it?
It's on the blanket. My
Well,
grandmother.
the nap-
did it.
the
You know, the blanket I
navigators.
have, one of them.
Okay.
Send me a calendar.
Yeah,
That's last
yeah.
That's last month.
Right. But when somebody makes a claim like all religions lead to God, this verse, since it's one of your favorites, should immediately spring to mind. Well, wait a minute. This is what Jesus said. Jesus said, nobody goes to the Father except through me.
Route 66. Route 66.
Route 66 used to be a road that got you from one end of the coast to the other end of the coast. I know there's highways now, but Route 66
I
used to be
know.
the place. I'm just, we have
She-
younger members in
She
the.
doesn't know what she's saying.
Not Miss Tamika.
Nah,
It's-
it's
I was
Route-
helping
it's-
Xavier
it's-
see
it's
that.
Route- Yeah, it's Route, because that's the final thing my grandmother said when she was speaking to someone one day.
That was
and She held
the-
her Bible in the air. This is how you get to eternity, Route 66.
Okay.
And dang, they let it go into disrepair in a lot of places too.
You're also probably too young to remember the show.
Yeah, because when you
Yeah,
said
Colombo.
Route 66, I
Yeah.
added another 6 to this movie that's called Route 666. And
Oh,
it did not go well.
right.
Right.
It did not go well. So like, yeah. Yeah.
a show called Route 66.
Look on Google.
Yeah.
Seems like I've heard of it, but I don't
Right.
Look on
know.
Google, sweetie.
I used
Okay.
to watch it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So-
What's wrong watching reruns?
Yeah. So before we get too
My
derailed,
TV.
let's talk about how to stop the suicide.
Mm.
How would you use Columbo tactic number 3 to expose the suicidal tendencies of these statements? It is wrong to condemn anybody for anything.
Okay, I had to ask a question. I had to ask what condemning means a couple of months ago, Pastor Johnson.
Okay.
Pastor Rowland, so, because I didn't know exactly what they meant by condemning people, because I've heard people say it in movies, but I didn't ever know what they meant by condemning somebody. So I can't tell you now
Telling
because I
them-
don't remember.
You're telling
Okay.
them they're wrong.
You're telling them they're wrong and you're almost passing judgment on them
Yeah.
and sentencing them.
Yeah.
You know, so if I commit murder and I go to in front of the court and the jury says this guy's guilty, then the judge is going to condemn me to prison for the rest of my life or the electric chair or something like that.
Okay, I'm gonna have to read it because it's not, my mind it's not clicking with it right now.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to actually just go and read. Sometimes it's when you teach stuff or say something, it might not connect right then, but once I get to a place where I can sit and reflect on it, then it'll more than likely come to me. It don't always connect right then.
No, I think that's absolutely great. And I applaud you for sitting and thinking about it later. Because a lot of times when we hear things that we kind of get stuck on, we'll just push them aside and move on.
No, that's why I do so much writing.
No, I
because if
think
it
that's
don't
great.
Connect with me right then I'll be able to read it later and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so you're an example to the rest of us. Thank you for doing that. Absolutely. We need to do that. So for this one, it is wrong to condemn anybody for anything. Bless you.
Oh, thank you.
So how would you use Columbo tactic number 3 on this one? And remember what Columbo tactic number 3 was? Asking a question to make a point. Right. How about something like,
So nothing is worth condemning over or
well, you might ask, are you condemning people for condemning?
condemning people.
people? That'll help them think about this. All right, so making that broad statement, it's wrong to condemn anybody for anything. They are actually condemning people for condemning people.
For condemning.
Right.
Okay, so help me understand what this is as far as this word. So the guy in the movie kills his brother. And he asks God to condemn him. What is he saying?
Well, if
How's he, what is he saying?
he's basically saying that he would like God to send this person to hell.
No. He kills his own brother and he asks God to condemn him. What is he saying?
Condemn himself or condemn his brother or the person.
Condemn him for killing his brother. What is he saying?
He's saying send me to hell.
Hmm?
He's saying send me to hell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The way I understand
Like to punish?
Mhm.
Like to punish.
To punish, right? To pass
The way I
judgment. To punish.
understand condemnation is the negative form of judgment. So judgment, to judge somebody just means like to examine or evaluate something. But condemnation is the negative form of that. It's where you take a judgment and you pronounce sentencing and punishment on somebody.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. That is why I gave that, because, you know, in the movie that I watched, he killed his own brother and he asked God to condemn him.
Okay.
So I wanted to know, what was he meaning by that? When he's saying condemn him, is he saying send me to hell or punish me for killing my
Punish me.
brother? Is that what he's saying?
That's
So
exactly.
is that, what is it saying here? To say this
It's wrong to punish anybody
for
or
anything?
condemn anybody for anything.
Okay, so
Right.
thank you, because you put another word where condemn is, so I can understand.
Right.
What it's saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you could say, are you condemning me for wanting to punish?
Are you condemning people who are condemning people?
Yeah.
Are you punishing people for punishing people?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All right, next one. Everyone's view is a product of his own prejudices. What about this one? How would we use Colombo tactic number 3 to discover this one?
How did you come to believe that?
No, that's.
Yeah, that's
So it's
Colombo number
that's-
1.
That's number one.
Mhm.
So is your view?
I'm sorry, Colombo number 2. How did you come to that conclusion?
Yeah.
Right, so tactic number 3, how do we make a point by asking a question?
Is this view also a prejudice?
Yeah, do you think that's a prejudiced view? I think that's entirely appropriate.
So the third Colombo tactic, is that the same as an implied question? Where you assume a certain answer, you ask a question a certain way in order to
It's more like a leading question.
a leading question.
Yeah, right. Let's see, was it Socrates who would ask questions to lead people to answers that he said that they already knew?
Mhm.
So it's the same kind of idea.
The
Right.
questions
They
asked
already
here
know, so
tell
you're
you
trying to
defining
help
prejudice.
shine the light of the suicide tactic or the suicide that their statement is making. All right, let's try another one. God doesn't take sides.
Are we using the second?
This is the third Colombo tactic.
Write it down. God doesn't take sides.
Yeah. Some of these are hard and you really have to think about them.
I'm just curious. Help me out, because I'm trying to understand you on this.
Yeah, those are good questions, but how do we use a
Does that
question to
mean
make a
he's on
point?
your side?
You nailed it.
Clear this up for me?
You nailed it.
I think
So-
I have to say, can you clear me up for this? Clear this up for me. I'd be really confused. Like,
Right.
God doesn't take sides. Like, what do you mean?
Well, did you hear what Miss Debbie said? She had a good one. Can you repeat that for us, Miss Debbie?
So does that mean that God is on your side or my side?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question.
Because I think
Good
he's on my
question.
side.
Because if they're saying that, they already have a point of view and they think that God is on their side on this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this commits suicide. All right. How about this one? You are what you eat.
Mm.
The moms in the room have probably said this before. What do you think?
I hope not.
This one's kind of tricky. You know, we've all heard this.
Yeah. What is, you want to know? Is it a suicide or what? What do you
Well,
wanna
how
know?
would you make how would you use Colombo tactic number 3, which is asking a question to make a point to help them understand that this is a contradiction?
So if I eat a hamburger, does that make me a cow?
Well, that's really what it comes down to, but all right, so let me ask you this. If you are what you eat, so you have to eat something before you become something. Is that right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I don't come into existence before
Until
I've
I've
eaten something? And then once I've eaten something, now I'm whatever that was?
Oh.
So that means if I eat a pancake, I be a pancake?
Right. You'd be a pancake, but
But
you first have to be something before you're a pancake.
How did I get in my mother's womb if I hadn't eaten anything?
Right. So this is kind of, you know, one thing that we've always heard, but this statement is self-refuting.
Yeah.
You can't be something unless you've eaten something.
And you can't eat something unless
You are something.
you are something.
Right. So this
It
one,
sounds good though.
it sounds good. Yeah, and they make a different point with it, but so anyway, all right, next one. The world is an illusion and we're each a part of the illusion.
Wow.
Well, can I go to heaven then now? I'm tired of being in this illusion.
Yeah, wake me up. Yeah.
I'm dreaming. Wake me up.
Yeah, I'm dreaming, wake me up. So how would we use Colombo tactic number 3 to help them understand where this one goes wrong?
I guess we're just dreaming that you're asking me this, you're saying this statement.
You're getting there. You're getting there.
Well, how can we know the difference between reality and illusion?
If you were living in an illusion, would you know it?
Probably not.
Would it be an illusion if you knew it?
And that's not to get it confused with hallucination, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
I'm
Think of yeah, well, it kind of is, you know, but if you think about, we talked earlier about the Peanuts. So does Charlie Brown know he's a cartoon?
Nope.
No,
I don't think Charlie Brown knows much about anything.
only what Charles Schultz tells him.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Charles Schultz is dead, so
Yeah,
that's
so
probably
you
not,
can't tell him
Yeah.
anything anymore.
but
It's a rerun.
Charlie lives on.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so again, some of these are really difficult and you have to think about them. All right, next up, the Bible could not have been inspired by God because men wrote it and men make mistakes.
If they're inspired by God, God makes no mistakes. So in order for them to be inspired by God, it had, okay.
That's it. That's exactly it. So if it's inspired by God, God doesn't make mistakes, right? And he uses men to write his word, then
Where's the mistake?
whether they make mistakes or not, God's the one inspiring it, right?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, another tricky one. God can't exist because there's so much evil in the world. Now, this one you really got to think about.
God can't exist because there's so much evil in the world.
God can't
Genesis
exist.
3.
Back to Genesis 3.
For what? Genesis 3.
God can't exist because there's so much evil in the world.
Right.
Yet he's the same God that warned you there would be troubles in this world.
Right. So how would we use Columbo tactic number 3, asking a question to make a point to help them understand the fallacy of what they're saying? This one's, it's really tricky.
How did you come to that conclusion?
That's
Was
question
it-
number 2.
Wasn't God? Didn't
What's
God
not
exist
number 3?
before? Didn't God exist before there was evil? Because before there was a world.
I think you're getting there.
God can't exist because
Can't exist because there's so much evil. in the world. But he existed before there was a world.
And he knew there was gonna be evil in the world.
Yeah, he did. But how do we ask questions? If somebody makes a statement, how do we ask questions to help them
What was the
understand?
third question, because how did I not write that? And I got the first and the second.
Colombo tactic number 3. It's a tactic number 3. It's not a question, but it's asking questions to make a point. So we're getting close on time. So we may need help from our philosopher. So one of the first things you might want to ask is, what's evil? What do you mean by evil?
Yeah, but that's not Columbo number 3.
No, it is. So what do you mean by evil? All right. So if I ask you that question, what do you mean by evil? What is that? What is evil?
So that's a point.
Unnecessary suffering. Okay. So if there's unnecessary,
Anything outside of God.
right? Anything outside of God? So if it's unnecessary suffering, does that imply that there's a threshold where suffering is necessary and where suffering is not necessary? So help me out with this, Adrian.
Probably say that all suffering is unnecessary.
All suffering is unnecessary? Okay. So why is suffering bad?
Suffering, turning into that mindset.
Who's happy suffering?
Suffering is bad because of
No.
having the ability to stop suffering and failing to do that is morally reprehensible. So in saying that if there's a child that's drowning in a pool and you have the power to save that child without drowning yourself and refuse to do that, that's a morally blameworthy act.
Right.
So they transfer that same logic to God and say, well, God has the power to end all suffering in the world, but fails to do that. So if he fails to do it, either he doesn't exist or he just doesn't care. He's
Right.
a nonchalant God.
Right. So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Wow.
So you used an interesting term. You said suffering is bad. So if suffering is bad, does that assume there's a good?
No. Well, it can assume that. Yeah, it can assume that.
You can't have a bad without a good, right?
Mhm.
So-
There is no, yeah, there
So-
is no.
So where do we get our standard of good? We get our standard of good from God. So-
God is good all the time, and all the time God's good.
So the fact that there is evil implies that there is a good, and there is no objective standard of good without God. So by asking those questions, we can help them see that.
I'm sorry. I don't know. Tiffany, did you see that part of Brooklyn when Eddie Murphy was up there preaching evil is good?
Oh, yeah.
That part where he tried to make it seem like it was just this part where he tried to make everybody believe through
'Cause he
probably the illusion that without he kind of turned it around the way you're putting it, but he turned it around saying that, you know, without I think he's saying without good, that he turned it around. I can't say it like he said it, but it was just funny because he had the whole choir at the end, congregation singing
Yeah.
evil.
It was
is
good.
good.
It was good to be bad.
Yeah. So it was okay. That evil was fine to be evil. That it was good. It's necessary.
Right.
He said it was necessary.
Well, Eddie Murphy's wrong.
Yeah, the character in the movie.
Yeah.
He was his character
Right.
in the movie. So
Yeah, and I
like,
get that. But, you know, philosophically speaking, evil is a privation of good. Evil is not a thing in and of itself. It's a absence of something. Like a donut hole is not those little round pasty treats. A donut hole is nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
The whole.
I actually made one of my classes mad because I brought in this little cute box from Dunkin' Donuts. I put it on the table and somebody said, "What is that?" I said, "It's a box of donut holes." And so they were like, "Oh, can I have some?" I said, "Yeah, have all you want." They open the box and it's empty. So they were mad at me, but a donut hole is an absence of donut, right? Just like a shadow is not a thing. A shadow is an absence of light. Evil is an absence of good. Okay, so you can't have good if there is no God, no objective good. All right, let's see. And I'm losing power. Oh. All right, things are fading. All right, see if we can get through this a little more quickly. God can't exist because, let's see. Breaking up.
Bless
Appreciate it.
All right, it's managing. All right, let me see if I can get a cord. Talk amongst yourselves for a minute.
You need an extension cord?
I've got an extension cord, but I don't have the power for.
These are hard.
Like, it'll literally connect probably once, you know, I start reading, and when I get home and just be in the quiet, it'll come at the least time I expect it.
That one doesn't fit in there. It's for the other laptop.
Go to the services out of it.
I guess what I'm thinking is,
I feel like
you know,
shit.
you can't recognize a good unless you have people to compare it to.
Mhm.
There we go. There's, I don't think that's true. I think you appreciate the good more when you see the lack of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. All right, so next one up. God used Darwinian evolution to design the world.
Who?
Darwin.
Darwin.
Charles Darwin. You've heard of Charles Darwin,
Right.
right? And his idea that we all came from nothing
Yeah, you missed the first.
and we,
Yeah.
you know.
You haven't
we
heard
changed
of,
from this to this to this and. here
you haven't
we
heard,
are.
you haven't heard of Darwinian evolution or evolution?
Oh, her, yeah,
Yeah.
evolution.
Yeah, well, they're just calling it Darwinian evolution because
Oh,
he's the
right.
one that,
Idea.
he's the one that
Right,
brought it up, you know,
Right.
he's the one that started that idea.
right. So,
Charles Darwin.
Oh, so we was like monkeys and then we turned to people.
Yeah, that's his
we
idea.
we came from the pond and evolved and
Yeah,
all of those things, right?
yeah.
Lord have mercy.
I know.
Just take a word.
So how can we use Colombo tactic number 3 to get at the root of this one? This one, you know, I think once I point it out to you, you'll be able to see it.
Well, you think that we came from nothing and became something? Mhm.
How does something come from nothing?
Yeah.
Not how.
Right. But how do we help them see that they're committing suicide when they use a statement like this?
I would have sucked at this part of college.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
I would have sucked at this part of college.
All right,
That's
so
why I didn't go.
yeah, so there's a couple of things about this. One of, you know, when I first read this question or heard this question, the first thing that popped in my mind is who came first, God or Darwin? So that's not the right question for this, but it's just one of those.
It just popped into
So
your head.
God used Darwin? No, that's not how it works. But Darwinianism in its truest form is only applied towards biological creatures. So it's the evolution of species and it's random change mutations over time. So, you know, we started in the pond and somehow or another things came together in a pond. And then after the pond, they started breathing air and then they started walking and then blah, 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 blah. So that's pure Darwinian evolution. But the way this statement is saying is that when you think about designing the world, Darwin only handles biology, but when the world itself, how did creation come about? So the question you might want to ask is, what do you mean by evolution? And evolution itself is blind change over time.
Okay, with no.
No intervention,
Ding,
right?
ding.
So if that's the case, if it's blind and random change over time, then how can it be designed? Because evolution itself is random change over time.
Huh.
The creator of evolution is chance. So how can it be designed if it's random and blind?
we're just saying that design implies.
You can't have design without a designer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So evolution that's the definition of evolution is blind.
A blind, unguided process. Random change over time.
Which isn't the same as the.
You said blind, unguided process?
Evolution is a blind, unguided process. Random change over time. So if that's the case, how can it be designed?
Because without God, the world couldn't have been created either, so.
That is true. All right. Moving ahead. Let's see. Okay, sibling rivalry. Sometimes objections come in pairs that are logically inconsistent with each other. This puts them in rivalry. This doesn't mean that both questions are false, but it does cut your task in half because both cannot be true at the same time. It also may expose the potential irrationality of a person making the challenge. So consider the following examples. We'll look at a few examples of these. Okay, in this conversation between a Christian man and a Hindu who held two views which were inconsistent with each other. Let's see if you can point this out or you can see this as we go through. Okay, so the Hindu man says, is Gandhi in heaven? Heaven would be a very poor place without Gandhi in it. So the Christian man says, well, sir, you must believe in heaven then. And apparently you have done some thinking about it, about what would qualify someone for it. Tell me, what kind of people go to heaven? Okay, he's asking that Colombo question or tactic number 3. The Hindu man says, good people go to heaven. So the Christian responds and says, but this idea of a good person is very unclear to me. What is good? Okay. To which the Hindu man replies, good and bad are relative. There is no clear definition. Are you guys kind of seeing where it's going? Okay. So the Christian man clearly identifies the fault. And he said, if that's true, sir, that goodness is relative and can't be defined, how is it you assume Gandhi is good and should be in heaven? So here you see that he started out making the claim that Gandhi was good and that heaven would be bad without it. But if good and bad are relative, then how can he say Gandhi was good or that heaven would be bad without it?
Relative to what?
Well, it's subjective. Yeah, to him, right.
Okay.
Right. And you guys may or may not have heard this, but there are some people, relativists, who make the claim what's true for you may not be true for me.
Wow.
Okay.
There's no such thing as truth. It's
Try that with
universal truth.
Try that with gravity. See how that works for you. Gravity may be true for you, but it's not for me. And if that's the case, I'm going to start.
Bye.
Yeah, right.
See you later.
So in this sibling rivalry, Gandhi is good, and there is an objective standard of good and evil on the one side, but on the other side, morality is relative, and Gandhi cannot be called good in the ultimate sense. And since both of these can't be true at the same time, this is an example of a sibling rivalry suicide. So I would recommend that we always be alert for points of view that self-destruct. And don't feel you have to do all the work in refuting a bad argument. Keep your eyes open and stay alert to see if the view or comments commit suicide. And then ask a question. Does that position carry the seeds of its own destruction? Okay. So when you discover that your friend's problem is commit suicide or is self-refuting, ask a question that exploits the problem and let them sink their own ship. All right. So let's recap. First, we covered the nature of self-refuting claims. The suicidal views express contradictory concepts. Suicidal views are necessarily false, and they can't be true in any possible world. Second, we learned how to recognize when someone's view self-destructs. First, pay attention to the basic premise, conviction or claim, and then determine if the claim undermines itself. Does the statement satisfy its own requirements? Does the process have an internal contradiction? And then third, we examined examples of popular ideas that commit suicide and learn how to respond to them. And then finally, we learned how to recognize sibling rivalry suicide. This kind of suicide happens with logically inconsistent pairs of objections that oppose each other. And we can eliminate at least one of the two objections by pointing out the conflict. In our next session, we'll talk about the taking the roof off tactic. All right, so we are over our time once again. We started late. I apologize for that, but any questions before we dismiss? Any?
I'm gonna listen to this again.
I feel like I have to go home and digest it.
Yeah, this,
Same way.
yeah,
Same way to just digest it fully.
this has been pretty heavy and we went through it pretty quickly. So I would definitely recommend going back and doing reading or listening to it again. If you have the book, which I recommend everybody get, go through it, read it again.
Okay, so how do we listen to it again?
It will be online on our YouTube channel or on our website. And when I get home, I will start the rendering process, and it usually takes a couple of days. So in a couple of days, it'll be up. And if it's not up by Sunday, then throw a shoe at me.
Ask if you lost your keys. Forgot your keys.
Yeah.
We all dealing with our Everest, man.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you
So
much.
if no other questions or comments, I'll pray and then we'll